The pre-dawn air tasted of salt and secrets. Dr. Zephyr Blackwood stood at the edge of the pier, her silhouette barely visible against the dark water. The massive shape of the USS Triton loomed before her, America's newest ballistic missile submarine, a steel leviathan crouched in stillness, waiting for the deep. She tightened her grip on a small duffel bag and the laminated security credentials clipped to its strap. Inside that bag was everything she would need for the coming weeks, at least everything anyone thought she would need. The rest was stored in her head, and it weighed far more. A voice carried from the deck, above. Dr. Blackwood. Commander Adira Kalani stood near the gangway, her posture crisp, her eyes taking Zephyr in with a kind of efficiency reserved for assessing new recruits or unknown variables. "Welcome aboard the Triton," Kalani said, the words precise but not warm. Zephyr nodded once. "Thank you, Commander." The two women descended into the belly of the submarine, the gangway creaking faintly under their steps. The air below deck was warmer, carrying the tang of machinery oil and recycled oxygen. Narrow passageways forced sailors to flatten themselves against bulkheads to let them pass. Some offered polite nods, others simply stared. A pair of petty officers leaned just far enough into the corridor to watch her. One muttered, "Another civilian babysitter from DARPA. Great. What's she here for?" "Counting our coffee breaks," the other replied with a smirk. Kalani shot them a look sharp enough to slice paper. The men snapped back to their duties, but the point was made. Zephyr wasn't welcome. The briefing room was already packed when they arrived. Maps and charts covered the walls, and the air hummed with low conversation. Captain Merrick Rhodes, a weathered man with the kind of presence that could command silence without raising his voice, stood over the central table. "Attention on deck," Kalani announced. The room stilled instantly until Rhodes gestured for them to stand easy. His gaze flicked to Zephyr briefly before returning to the chart in front of him. "We have a guest for this patrol," he said. "Dr. Zephyr Blackwood will be monitoring communications and diagnostic systems during our deployment. Per Pentagon orders, her access is limited to non-essential systems only." A ripple of quiet skepticism moved through the senior officers. Rhodes didn't acknowledge it. Her presence is non-negotiable and comes directly from Naval intelligence. She will not interfere with operations. Any questions? No one spoke, but the silence had teeth. Hours later, Zephyr sat alone in the mess hall, her dinner tray pushed to one side while she scrolled through technical schematics on a secure tablet. Lieutenant Orion Lasco slid into the seat across from her, without asking. His tray clattered onto the table, a deliberate intrusion. "So, systems engineer, huh? What exactly are you here to fix that the Navy's own engineers can't?" Zephyr looked up from her tablet. Her expression was calm, unreadable. "Just ensuring protocol compliance, Lieutenant. Nothing operational." Lasco snorted. "Right. Well, when things get real, try not to get in the way. This isn't a research vessel. We run silent, we run deep, and civilians tend to panic when that happens." "I'll keep that in mind," she replied evenly. Later, in the solitude of her quarters, a space just large enough for a bunk, a locker, and her duffel, Zephyr pulled a sealed photograph from the bag. The image was of her at a formal ceremony, half obscured by deliberate censorship. The medal pinned to her chest was one no Navy registry would recognize. She studied it for a long moment, her face as still as the water outside the hull, before sliding it back into the bag. The Triton vibrated faintly beneath her feet, the ocean already starting to close over them. Whatever the coming weeks held, she knew one thing. This boat, this crew, this mission, they had no idea who she truly was. And for now, that was exactly how it needed to stay. 3 days out, the Triton had already sunk into its patrol rhythm. In the confined, pressurized world beneath the waves, time stretched and folded strangely. There was no sunrise, no sunset, just the steady hum of a reactor and the heartbeat thrum of the propellers pushing through black water. Zephyr kept mostly to herself, working quietly at her monitoring station in the forward compartment. The space was small, dominated by a bank of terminals and diagnostic readouts that cycled through endless streams of numbers. Officially, Her role was to track communications integrity and system health, ensuring the boat's sensors and comm arrays complied with protocol. Unofficially, well, no one needed to know what she was really watching. The crew avoided her in that polite but unmistakable Navy way. Conversations went quiet when she passed. Even in the mess, she was often the only one seated at her table, her tablet casting a pale glow on her face while the rest of the crew swapped jokes and stories at the other end of the room. Commander Kalani, at least, treated her with the same professional distance she applied to everyone. But even that neutrality felt like a constant reminder. You're not one of us. On the fourth day, the routine broke. A klaxon blared through the submarine's narrow corridors, its sharp pulse slicing through every compartment. Battle stations. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill. Sailors rushed past Zephyr, boots thudding against steel. She stayed at her console, eyes on the system displays. Captain Rhodes entered the control room, his voice cutting through the noise. Simulated hostile contact. Prepare defensive countermeasures. Orders flew, crew members responding with the efficiency of practiced muscle memory. Zephyr's fingers danced over her terminal, logging the activity for the official record, and for her own purposes. That's when Executive Officer Thaddeus Kerrigan noticed her. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried the kind of authority that never required a raised voice. He crossed the deck toward her. "Dr. Blackwood," he said, tone clipped. "You need to clear the command center. Civilian presence is prohibited during launch procedures." "Sir, my orders." "I don't care about your orders." His voice sharpened. "This is a missile submarine conducting critical operations." "Out. Now." Every eye in the control room flicked toward them. Before Zephyr could reply, Captain Rhodes glanced over. "She stays, XO. Standing orders." Kerrigan's frown deepened. "With all due respect, Captain. It's not open for discussion." The moment passed, but Zephyr filed it away. Kerrigan didn't just resent her presence. He wanted her gone. The drill continued without incident, though an hour later, another anomaly surfaced. "Sir," the communications officer called out. "External comms are down. No contact with Fleet Command." "Diagnostics?" Rhodes asked, moving to the console. "All systems check out, sir. Feels like we're being jammed, but there's no signature." Zephyr's gaze sharpened. That was odd. Before she could speak, the missile launch sequence engaged automatically. Red lights flashed across the control room as the computer's synthetic voice announced, "Missile launch sequence initiated. Authorization code accepted." Rhodes spun toward the weapons console. "We haven't received launch authorization." "Override," Kerrigan ordered. "Abort launch sequence." The weapons officer's hands flew over the controls. "Systems not responding, sir." The automated process rolled forward, step by step. Targeting parameters. Launch tube flooding. Pressure equalization. The crew worked in frantic unison, attempting every bypass in the manual. Nothing worked. Then silence. The sequence froze on the final stage, waiting for one last authorization. "It's like the system is waiting for something we don't have," the weapons officer said. Zephyr leaned back slightly in her chair. She knew exactly what it was waiting for. But she also knew this wasn't the moment to explain. Not yet. The red emergency lights painted every face in the control room with the same hard, urgent glow. Officers leaned over their stations, barking out status updates that all carried the same grim weight. Nothing is working. Captain Rhodes stood at the center, calm on the outside, but with a tension in his jaw that told another story. "Report. Launch sequence frozen at step 7, sir," the weapons officer replied. "Systems waiting for a final authorization code." "Then kill the power to the launch system," Kerrigan snapped. "We've tried. It's isolated. Won't shut down without the code." Rhodes' eyes slid toward Zephyr. She hadn't moved from her station, but she wasn't staring at her own screen anymore. She was watching everything. "Dr. Blackwood," Rhodes said carefully, "is this part of your monitoring program?" "No," she said, voice steady. Kerrigan stepped forward. "Then you're in the way. Move aside." Zephyr stood. She didn't raise her voice, but somehow it carried over the din. "Captain Rhodes, Phantom Protocol is in effect. Authorization Blackwood, Epsilon 790. The room went silent. Even the air circulation seemed to hush. Rhodes froze, eyes narrowing. Say that again. Authorization Blackwood, Epsilon 790, she repeated, locking her gaze on his. Give me direct access to the main terminal. Kerrigan barked a bitter laugh. Absolutely not. This civilian isn't touching our weapon systems. That's an order, Rhodes cut in sharply. Give her access. For the first time since boarding the Triton, Zephyr moved with complete command. She strode to the weapon station, the crew parting instinctively. Her hands flew across the keyboard, faster than the eye could track. Lines of code streamed across the display, not the Navy's standard command set, but something deeper, older, and far more guarded. Final authorization. The system intoned. Blackwood, Zephyr E Phantom Protocol authenticated. The frozen sequence began to unwind, each stage reversing until the launch system went dark. Communications restored, sir, the comms officer called out. Kerrigan stared at her as though seeing a ghost. What the hell is Phantom Protocol? Before Rhodes could answer, the main screen flickered to life with the face of Admiral Neva. His voice clipped and precise. Captain Rhodes, confirm that Dr. Blackwood has authorized the simulated launch sequence. Rhodes' voice was like steel. Confirmed, Admiral. But I want to know what's going on aboard my vessel. Neva's expression didn't shift. After the Valiant incident 3 years ago, we implemented Phantom Protocol. Every nuclear submarine now carries one civilian whose true mission is known only to the highest levels of command, the human firewall. No launch can be completed without their authentication. A ripple of disbelief moved through the room. Dr. Blackwood designed the fail-safe, Neva continued. She holds the highest clearance in naval history, and she answers only to the Joint Chiefs and the President. Silence followed, thick and absolute. For the first time since she'd boarded, the crew looked at Zephyr not with suspicion, but with something else. Wariness, respect, maybe even awe. Rhodes broke the stillness. Understood, Admiral. And the drill? Neva's voice sharpened. Wasn't entirely a drill. We've had reason to believe someone may attempt to compromise your vessel's launch systems. Consider this a live readiness check. The screen went black. Rhodes turned to Zephyr. My quarters. Now, as they left, the crew's eyes followed her every step. They had just learned she wasn't here to watch over them. She was here to guard something far bigger. The captain's quarters were small, but the air inside felt heavier than the rest of the boat. Rhodes shut the door behind them with a deliberate click. Sit, he said. Zephyr lowered herself into the chair opposite his desk, posture straight, expression unreadable. Rhodes paced once, twice, then stopped. 3 years. You've been embedding on submarines for 3 years, and not once did anyone suspect your true mission. That was a point, Captain, Zephyr replied evenly. Phantom Protocol only works if no one knows it exists. If the wrong people discovered there's a human firewall in the system, they'd target it immediately. Rhodes leaned forward, resting both hands on the desk. The Valiant incident. What really happened? Zephyr's eyes flickered, the first crack in her composure. The official report calls it a systems malfunction. In reality, someone tried to seize control of the launch sequence. Whoever it was bypassed multiple safeguards and would have succeeded if not for one error in the targeting algorithm. Rhodes' voice dropped. And your connection? My husband, she said softly. Commander Everett Blackwood. He was the weapons officer aboard the Valiant. He spotted anomalies in the launch code weeks before the incident. He reported them, but his concerns were dismissed. When the takeover began, he manually sabotaged the targeting systems. Rhodes' voice was quieter now. He didn't make it. Zephyr shook her head once. No. And that's when the Navy came to me. I built the system Everett died protecting, and I made sure it could never be activated without me. For a long moment, neither spoke. The low hum of the Triton systems filled the silence like a heartbeat. Then Rhodes said, Admiral Neva hinted at a threat. You think it's real? I know it is, Zephyr replied. We've been tracking an organization called the Nullifiers. They believe nuclear weapons are too dangerous for any government to control. They've infiltrated military and intelligence ranks across several countries. They don't just want to disarm the world. They're willing to provoke an incident to force it. Provoking an incident on my boat, Rhodes said flatly. Exactly, Zephyr confirmed. If they can trigger a launch protocol and prove Phantom Protocol exists, they'll know how to attack it. Rhodes' jaw tightened. Which means they might already have someone aboard. Zephyr nodded once. That's what I'd assume. Rhodes looked at her for a long moment, weighing something. How do we find them? We create a situation they can't ignore, she said. Force a pre-launch condition. Whoever's embedded will have to act to either block or hijack the sequence. That's when we catch them. Rhodes exhaled slowly, the decision already made. Let's do it. They stepped back into the control room to find the tension thicker than before. The sonar operator looked up. Captain, the Russian sub is close to, within 500 meters. They're circling us. Battle stations, Rhodes ordered calmly. Prepare countermeasures. As the crew scrambled, Rhodes leaned toward Kerrigan. Initiate pre-launch sequence Alpha. Kerrigan stiffened. Sir, that's a first strike protocol. I'm aware, Commander. Consider it a readiness drill. Kerrigan hesitated, then nodded. Aye, sir. Initiating pre-launch sequence Alpha. The computer's voice rang out again. Missile pre-launch sequence initiated. All stations prepare for authorization protocol. Zephyr's eyes weren't on the screens. They were on the people. Most of the crew showed disciplined focus, but two stood out. The communications officer, Lieutenant Bellamy, was sweating despite the cool air. His eyes kept darting toward the weapons console. Stage 2, targeting parameters, the system announced. Bellamy's hand drifted toward his uniform pocket. Zephyr's voice cut through the room. Commander Kerrigan, Security Protocol 739. Kerrigan moved instantly, grabbing Bellamy's wrist and pulling a small, modified electronics module into view. What is this, Lieutenant? Rhodes demanded. Bellamy's expression twisted. Do you have any idea what those weapons can do? What you're all blindly protecting? I know exactly what they can do, Rhodes said coldly. That's why we make sure no one uses them without proper authority. Take him to the brig, Rhodes ordered. Full isolation protocol. As the Marines hauled Bellamy away, the sonar operator called out. Russian sub is breaking off, increasing distance. They know their assets burned, Zephyr murmured. Rhodes turned to her. How'd you know it was him? I didn't, she admitted. But I knew the saboteur wouldn't risk letting a launch proceed they couldn't control. They had to act. The tension in the control room didn't lift, but the danger, for now, had passed. The brig aboard the Triton was barely large enough for a single detainee, but it was more than enough to contain Lieutenant Bellamy. Two armed Marines stood outside the hatch, faces blank and unreadable. In the control room, Rhodes ordered the crew to maintain alert status. We keep our guard up until that Russian sub is out of our sphere, he said. They were here for a reason. Hours passed under that tense vigil. Sonar eventually confirmed the Russian boat had turned and was accelerating away. Still, Rhodes waited another 2 hours before finally giving the order to stand down. The change in the air was subtle, a loosening of shoulders, a slight shift in tone, but the undercurrent remained. Someone they'd served with, someone they trusted, had been willing to compromise the ship and every life aboard. In the mess, Zephyr sat at the same table she always had, reviewing security logs on her tablet. She heard the footsteps before she saw him. Rhodes dropped into the seat across from her. Command wants a full debrief the moment we dock, he said. But I'd like my own answers first. Zephyr looked up. What would you like to know, Captain? He leaned forward. Who are the nullifiers really? How deep does this go? Her voice was calm but edged with weariness. We don't know their full reach. Cells operate independently. Some are embedded in militaries, some in intelligence agencies, some in tech companies. Their objective is the same: remove nuclear weapons from every nation's control. By force, if necessary. Rhodes shook his head slowly. They claim to want to save humanity, but they're willing to gamble with it. Yes, she said simply. They're zealots. And zealots always think the risk is worth the cause. And your husband? Rhodes asked quietly. Her eyes softened for the first time since coming aboard. Everett uncovered nullifier code fragments in the Valiant's targeting system. When the attempt happened, he sabotaged it from inside the weapons bay. He bought the Navy enough time to cut control entirely. He didn't survive the blowback. Rhodes sat back, regarding her with a different kind of respect. And you've been carrying the burden since. I've been doing my job, she corrected gently. One boat at a time. The next morning, the Triton surfaced off the Washington coast to re-establish secure communications with Fleet Command. The order came down almost immediately. Assemble the entire crew in the missile bay. Rhodes stood before them, hands clasped behind his back. Yesterday, this crew faced a threat that could have ended in catastrophe, he began. The danger didn't come from the ocean around us, but from within our own ranks. Lieutenant Bellamy acted on behalf of a rogue organization seeking to compromise our nuclear launch systems. A ripple of murmurs moved through the gathered sailors. His capture, Rhodes continued, was made possible through the actions of someone most of you underestimated. He turned toward Zephyr. Dr. Zephyr Blackwood stepped forward. She did, aware of every eye in the bay. Dr. Blackwood, Rhodes said, his voice carrying the weight of the moment, holds the highest security clearance in the United States Navy. She personally designed the fail-safe systems that protect our arsenal from unauthorized use. Yesterday, she was the difference between safety and disaster. For a heartbeat, there was only silence. Then Commander Carrigan stepped forward and saluted her, crisp, deliberate. One by one, every member of the crew followed suit. Zephyr returned each salute, her expression steady. But something in her chest loosened. Not relief exactly. She knew her work was far from over, but recognition that, for this moment, they understood. 2 days later, the Triton docked at Naval Base Kitsap. Admiral Neva waited on the pier with a security detail. The crew lined the gangway as Zephyr prepared to disembark. Each sailor saluted her as she passed, the gesture quiet but heavy with meaning. At the hatch, Rhodes handed her a triangular case containing a folded flag. From the crew, he said, the President wants to see you. Something about the next generation of security protocols. Zephyr took the flag with both hands. I just did my job, Captain. Rhodes' mouth quirked in a faint smile. No, Doctor. You did everyone's job. The job we didn't even know needed doing. She turned toward the pier, walking toward Neva and the waiting sedan. Rhodes called after her, will we see you again? Zephyr glanced over her shoulder. Maybe. Different name. Different cover. But I'll be there when needed. We'll be watching for you, Rhodes promised. That's the point, Captain, she said, allowing the faintest smile to reach her eyes. You won't know to watch until the moment I'm needed. She disappeared into the waiting car, the door closing with a solid final sound. The Triton's crew watched her go, each silently aware of a truth they'd never forget. Sometimes the most important person on the boat isn't the one giving the orders. It's the one you never realized was holding the keys all along.